Let's get a move on then. And Tracxn Technologies, it's a data intelligence platform, and they have unveiled their semi-annual funding report. Neha Singh is the co-founder and now joins in with the details. Neha, you know, given that the tech startup ecosystem in India has raised a total of about $4.1 billion in the first half, how does that compare to last year? Give us a view on what the India story looks like.
Thanks a lot for having me. So if you look at the first half of the current year, it saw more than $4 billion to now reaching nearly $5 billion of funding in the Indian tech startups. And this is higher than what it was in the first half of last year. So this is good news. So if you look at the decline which was happening in terms of funding Q-on-Q basis, so that has started to reverse. And hopefully the funding winter, it has been talked about a lot. That seems to be coming to an end. And the general consensus is that it should improve from here. And a couple of points to note over here is one is especially the late stage funding. So if you look at across the funding, the late stage was the one in which the decline was more stark last year. That has started to reverse. So a good proxy for that, for instance, is the number of new unicorn rounds that the ecosystem saw in the first half. So in the first half, there were 3 new companies that that got added to the unicorn list, as compared to none in the first half of last year, right? So that's a good progress, and the current run rate is higher than last year. And they also saw more $100 million rounds, as well as some of the late stage investors, which had been fairly quiet last year, like including the likes of Tiger Global or a SoftBank. This talks about them looking at deals, and hopefully you should see some more activity in the second half of this year. So that is probably one thing that stood out. And another thing that stood out is the whole surge in IPO activity. So if you see, 2024 is expected to be a record year for the IPO markets in general. And this year has already seen more than 100 companies, getting listed on the main board. So even for the tech ecosystem, this was sort of a record year in terms of the number of new issues that you saw. So the first half of the current year, 2024, saw nearly 17 companies, going for listing, including the likes of companies like an Ixico, Office, Digit, etc. Which were like good subscribed issues. So that is another thing, that probably stood out in the first half. And there's a good pipeline of companies that are in the process of getting listed as well. And, that helps to give liquidity to some of the investors, which, then fuels back, goes back to the funding ecosystem.
Sure. So which are some of the top performing sectors then in India?
Yeah, in terms of the sectors, so the top few sectors included the likes of retail and consumer, including some of the platforms which saw large rounds like Flipkart or a Meesho, even B2B as well as D2C brands. That was one category of sector. And the other, which was more evergreen, is the fintech sectors. So you saw companies like a Perfios or a CreditBee also raise rounds. So these were the 2 sectors in terms of the late stage. In terms of the more emerging, EV continues to be one sector which is getting investor interest. So you saw multiple companies raise round within that sector, including the ones in electric scooter like a Yulu or a Ather, as well as in battery technology like a Battery Smart, raise rounds. So that continues to be a sector of investor interest.
Right. And what about the kind of trends that you're foreseeing when it comes to different stages of funding, the early stage, seed stage funding? How does that look like?
Yeah. So as we had pointed out in the last few quarters, there was a decline which was happening, across these stages, more marked by the decline in the late stage. So if you compare across stages, the early stage, has probably remained in the same level as last year. And the late stage has seen an increase in terms of the funding which has gone into the late stage companies. So there you see a good trend, that the investor activity is also coming back to the late stage.
And when it comes to individual cities, what are the kind of trends that the report has spoken about with respect to which cities are making it to the top?
So in terms of the cities, Bangalore continues to be the city which saw most amount of funding. That is the same trend that we had seen across the last few quarters as well. On the second spot, you had Mumbai overtaking Delhi and Gurgaon in the first half of this year, thanks to the funding in a few fintech companies and a few large consumer companies. But in terms of the top cities, it continues to be among Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, Gurgaon. We also saw Hyderabad, coming up into this time.
You had a number of companies as well that did go public. What about the overall IPOs? Has that number risen in comparison to what we've witnessed last year?
So there was a mark. So the IPO market is fairly upbeat, with the index being at a near all-time high. That was one space which saw a lot more excitement in the whole, funded startup ecosystem, both in terms of investors as well as companies. So in the first half of this year, you saw a record number of tech companies also going for listing. So you saw nearly 17 issues, including the likes of some of the companies like Inoffice or Ixigo or Digit, getting listed, getting good subscription as well. And in terms of the pipeline as well, you see a good, healthy pipeline of companies who are looking to get listed, including some of the ones which are domiciled in India, as well as some of the other ones which are also flipping their HQs, from either US or Singapore to India, so that they can tap into the Indian public, markets as well. So you see, for instance, in terms of the pipeline, you see the news of Pine Labs probably going for a listing soon, as well as some of the other companies who are also looking to flip their HQs to India, because the IPO market, in India is in a fairly good shape today, and a lot of the companies are, in the process of preparing themselves to getting listed here.
Okay, thanks so much, Neha, for joining in.